All right, well, I guess we'll get started. Good evening and welcome to our presentation. I'm Becky Heike-Kwiatkowski, one of the Board of Director members of the Menasha Historical Society. Tonight I have the opportunity and great pleasure to be working alongside our presenters, Tom Van Lieshout and his brother Jim. As we begin our new and interesting series about the early builders and entrepreneurs in Neenah and Menasha. I wanted to say thank you to all of you for showing up and coming tonight, and for those of you who will be watching this later online. I also wanted to thank on behalf of both societies, the beautiful Elisha D. Smith Library for hosting our presentation. We appreciate their assistance not only with allowing us to share these presentations, but also for their support in sharing local history with the community. I'd also like to thank Paul for video recording tonight, and to the Menasha Historical Society President Nick Jemney for all the editing that he's done on all the videos in all of our series. He helps us get them all set up and ready on our YouTube channels. I also wanted to have a big thank you to Tom Van Lieshout for all of his hard work in researching and writing so many of the presentations that we've had. Your hard work and dedication to preserving and sharing our community stories is appreciated and much respected. All right, one more reminder, if you have any local history stories or stories to add to the topics that we present, please reach out to either the Menasha Historical Society or the Neenah Historical Society. We love to hear your stories, and we will help you document them for future generations to enjoy as well. Both of our societies also have amazing Facebook pages, if you're on social media, where the stories of our communities are shared at least weekly. We're always looking for new and interesting stories, or if you have a question about either community, please send them over. These stories and questions lead to great posts or even presentations. Both of our societies also offer YouTube channels. Many of our past programs are available online. They're great for days when the weather is kind of yucky, or when you're just in the mood to learn about local history. Here you can find our past popular programs, including the Hidden History of Doty Island series, the Founders and Settlers of Neenah-Menasha series, an Intertribal Powwow, and wonderful Menasha sports stories from Adrian Martin, who's sitting over there, and so much more. And for those of you who don't know, Adrian does have his books for sale tonight, and if you purchase the Menasha book, I understand you get some free Cracker Jacks with that as well. So make sure to stop by after that presentation. I'd also like to invite you to the upcoming programs of both societies. Many of the details of the upcoming programs are available on each society's website. Specifically for the Menasha Historical Society, our May program will be held at the University of Wisconsin-Fox Cities campus, the one here in Menasha. History professor Steve Sheehan will take us on a look back at the fascinating stories and the history of the campus as it closes at the end of the semester. Join us on May 8th at 6:30 p.m. in room 1338. Both societies also have their own museum at the Octagon House on Smith Street in Neenah, or the Memorial Building, the first floor on the Kai Street in Menasha, across from Smith Park. If you go to the Neenah Historical Society, they have their brand new exhibit open, and Erica can tell you more about that. All right. As I mentioned earlier, tonight we are starting a new series, The Early Builders and Entrepreneurs of Neenah and Menasha. This series follows our last series, Founders and Settlers of Neenah and Menasha. These presentations are available on our YouTube channels if you want a more detailed look into these families. As a brief overview, the earliest founders and settlers are names that are quite familiar in our cities. Governor James Doty and his son Charles Doty, Harvey Jones, Curtis Reed, and Harrison Reed. These men were considered the founders of Neenah and Menasha. They were the ones who came as the land speculators, financiers, and politicians of what we consider Neenah and Menasha. They came, they liked what they saw, and established, organized, and created the communities that we enjoy today. The settlers that we considered in the earlier series were those who came to the area after it was founded. They came primarily from the East Coast with promises of cheap land and ample opportunities. They are the early homesteaders and established permanent residences in the Neenah and Menasha area. We covered several families in this portion of the series, including George Mansour, Michael Kerwin, Reverend O.P. Clinton, Thomas Grimes, Joseph Jourdain, and Amos Page. Their stories were told in many cases by their descendants, sharing their personal family stories. If you missed any of these amazing stories, please be sure to check out our YouTube channels for the playback. As for tonight, we're going to move slightly forward in time. Once our communities were founded and early settlers established their homes, more individuals came to town and started establishing businesses. Early businesses covered our early industries in flour milling, lumber, wood containers, paper mills, and so much more. The names that you see here are some of the early businessmen and entrepreneurs we plan on discussing during this series. Please note that this is not an all-inclusive list of the businessmen of Neenah and Menasha. Tonight we'll be focusing on Captain Lauchlin McKinnon and Henry Sherry. And with that, I'll turn our presentation over to Tom Van Lieshout.
Thank you, Becky. And I'd also like to welcome you to our presentation this evening. It was a pleasure to kick off this new series. We'll begin tonight with one industrialist from each city. These two individuals had a lot in common. Both had fathers who were great role models and sons that carried on their legacies. Each owned large plots of land in our growing cities, were extremely wealthy, and each left a lasting legacy for us to enjoy today. But most importantly, both of these men have been lost in history, and that's why we label them the forgotten early entrepreneurs. Have you ever enjoyed a summer evening in Neenah's Riverside Park, or walked on its newly paved lakeshore walking path? Have you ever visited or prayed in either of Menasha's St. Thomas Episcopal Church or St. Patrick's Catholic Church? Do you drive on Nicolay Boulevard or Plank Road? Have you seen these homes or buildings in the Twin Cities, or wondered about the origins of their architecture or the families that built them? Are you aware of Neenah's historic Sherrytown, or been at the intersection of Henry and Sherry? Have you been to Colosso Park to watch a Menasha Max play baseball game? Do you know the origin of the team's name, Menasha Max? Well, all of these have origins in our forgotten businessmen. Menasha's L.B. McKinnon was a Scottish-born world traveler. He came from a prominent Scottish family and captain of the British Royal Navy. Most importantly, though, he was one of the earliest investors in the village of Menasha. Neenah's Henry Sherry was the richest lumber baron in the state of Wisconsin. He founded a northern Wisconsin city and built a paper mill that was operating until 2021. He had a significant role in the village of Neenah and its early development. Today we introduce them both to you, and we'll begin with Menasha's Captain McKinnon. The McKinnon family holds a special place in the Menasha Historical Society. Captain McKinnon's granddaughter, Ethel, was founding member of our organization in 1956. The photo on the left is a celebration of our 17th birthday. We are honored to begin this presentation with her grandfather. Ethel described her grandfather as an English gentleman farmer who traveled a great deal and had a keen interest in everything. Another description came from Menasha's own John Strange. John, founder of John Strange Paper, grew up on Doty Island, where L.B. McKinnon lived. In his reflections of his youth on the island, Mr. Strange said, All of the boys on Doty Island had great admiration for Captain McKinnon and his beautiful horses. He was always kind and courteous to each of us, even the ragged and poor. We'll cover the McKinnon story in 3 sections. I'll present Captain McKinnon's biography. Becky will discuss his first trip to Menasha, and Jim will examine his second trip to Menasha. Born April 21st, 1815, in Scotland, Lauchlin Bellingham McKinnon was the second son of William and Emma McKinnon. Lauchlin came from a prominent and wealthy, well-connected family in Scotland, with historical roots dating back to the medieval period. They were associated with the Highlands of Scotland, particularly the Isle of Skye. His father, William McKinnon, was the 33rd leader of the McKinnon clan. The clan's insignia is pictured here. His father was also magistrate and deputy lieutenant for Middlesex and a member of the British Parliament for 46 years. His mother, Emma, was daughter and sole heiress of Joseph Palmer, a famous English writer. Lauchlin's uncle, Colonel Daniel McKinnon, and grand-uncle, Major General Henry McKinnon, both pictured here, were decorated war heroes. In August of 1842, he married Augusta Entwistle from a wealthy English family. They had 6 children, 2 pictured upper right. Sons Falkland Center will make a big impact on the city of Wisconsin Rapids. And Dustin will carry on his father's affairs in Menasha, making a significant contribution to the city as an entrepreneur. With his family history, it was inevitable that young McKinnon would be eager to join the service. At age 14, he entered the Navy on Prince Regent. Quickly moving up in the ranks, he served as midshipman on the Belvidera. In June 1846, while serving on the Alecto, Lieutenant McKinnon distinguished himself in battle in Buenos Aires. Because of his operational success, he was promoted to commander of that ship in 1847. During a vacation leave in 1850, the captain and his family visited Menasha for the first time. Becky will detail this in section 2. In 1864, he retired from the Navy with the rank of captain. Once retired, he knew what he wanted to do: move to the United States and reside in Menasha. Jim will detail this portion in 3. As mentioned earlier, Captain McKinnon's father was in the British Parliament. In 1865, William decided to retire from politics, and upon receiving that news, Captain McKinnon ran for that position. Once winning his father's seat in Rye, the McKinnons packed up and moved back to England, leaving his son Dustin to remain in Menasha, managing the family affairs. The captain served 1 term, was not involved in any major policies or programs. The McKinnons retired to their home, the historic Ormley Lodge, which was set on 6 acres in the city of Ham. Built in 1715, this magnificent home remains a residence today. The McKinnons remained there until his death in 1877 and her death 1890. Both were buried in St. Andrew's Church, and pictured here is a memorial at the church honoring his service to his country. The captain always fondly remembered Menasha, his friends, and business associates. To show his love for Menasha and Wisconsin, the captain regularly sent copies of the London Illustrated News back home to various news outlets. Through these communications, he kept his associates updated on events of interest. upper left is an article of appreciation from the editor of Menasha's Saturday Evening Press. The Neenah Conservatory reprinted one of Captain's own editorials in the paper. The captain, aware of venture capital from England going west, wanted to let the financial leaders know of a specific investment possibilities in the growth in America. Here is a portion of that article.
Under these circumstances, Mr. Editor, I believe the attention of these moneyed classes will be attracted to the United States securities in land and railroads, and I venture to predict that large masses of capital will find its way out west. If west it goes, of which I have no doubt, I think a large portion will go to that most healthy, most beautiful, most productive, most desirable portion of northern Wisconsin, over which you so ably wield the pen. Mr. Dallas, the American minister, is highly esteemed in this country. He is universally liked. I have had the pleasure of making his acquaintance at several leading houses in London.
What a compliment to our area and foresight of the captain. Now Becky will discuss what brought this world traveler to Menasha for the first time. She will also share his experiences while exploring this area.
All right, let's imagine the year 1850. While in the Navy, the captain received a year leave. Emma wanted to tour the United States. They decided to go west. Captain McKinnon and his family embarked on their voyage to America, leaving England for the U.S. on the paddle wheel steamer, the Ocean Queen. They started in New York, traveled throughout the East Coast, and to Washington, D.C. Then they traveled westward to the remote Western Territory, including Wisconsin. The captain was a prolific writer and chronicled the entire adventure in his book, Atlantic and Transatlantic Sketches. Several chapters covered the Wisconsin Territory, a portion of this trip, specifically our Doty Island. This is one of the few eyewitness, first-person descriptions of the Fox Valley. We will use the captain's own words throughout most of this section. Let's start with how this world traveler found his way to Menasha. While in Washington, D.C., he was most intrigued with the large buildings and politics. He sat in on proceedings of both houses and was particularly captivated witnessing the sessions of our Navy's appropriations bill. He met with and had dinners with naval and military members. Son Falkland recounted another special encounter. During our sojourn here, my parents met with President Fillmore. The president invited them to dinner, and it happened that my father sat next to a congressman from Wisconsin, James Doty, soon to become the territorial governor. This gentleman invited the family to visit him and hunt at his official residence on Doty Island. In his book, McKinnon reprinted a letter from Doty confirming their conversation. Doty's purpose was to secure investors and entrepreneurs to the growing community. Here in Doty's own words.
I have some land, the soil of which is composed of a rich black loam. It is situated on the banks of the river Neenah, close to the outlet of Winnebago Lake, where steamboats pass daily. 2 villages are within a mile, Neenah on the one hand and Menasha on the other. A good market is at hand for agricultural produce, particularly culinary vegetables, also pigs and poultry. The soil is a rich limestone, capable of producing any crops in great perfection. It is part of an island of 850 acres. Several flour mills and sawmills, besides other kinds of machinery moved by water, are in the vicinity. Schools and well-established religious societies are in each of the villages. The country is settling rapidly, and respectable female helps are in great demand. I am now erecting several houses with parlor, kitchen, and bedroom below, and 2 chambers above, with a brick chimney and oven in the kitchen. Each of these houses will be surrounded by a secure fence to enclose 5 acres of cleared land. I will let these lots to tenants whose characters are satisfactory for 1 or 5 years as they prefer, taking as rent 1/2 the produce of the land. I will likewise give the accepted tenant a range for a cow and a pig on the adjoining land, and as much wood as he can use for fuel.
During the western portion of the trip to Wisconsin, Captain McKinnon decided to stay at Governor Doty's Grand Loggery. For 6 weeks, he explored, hunted, and evaluated the prospect of taking Doty up on the land grant offer. The 1965 Appleton Post-Crescent article referenced the captain's book, where he called the valley a game-filled paradise. Here is his first impressions of Doty Island and High Cliff.
At the outlet of the Lake Winnebago is an island containing 800 acres, the favorite haunt for ages of the Menominee Indians. And in truth, they are capital judges of locations. I was fortunate enough to receive an invitation to this favored spot, and by the great kindness and assistance of my host, the Governor of Wisconsin, the Honorable James Duane Doty, I was enabled not only to enjoy the finest sport, but likewise to investigate the best means of securing first-rate shooting for any adventurous English spirit that may despise the narrow and very expensive limits of the Seagirt Isles. For 6 weeks, I amused myself exploring in all directions. And the more I roamed through this beautiful country, the more I was delighted with it. Sometimes I climbed the range of limestone hills and traversed deserted Indian clearings. At others, I rambled through boundless flowery meadows and oak openings. On one of these rambles, I found myself in a vast prairie, several miles in extent. I was thinking of the difficulty of steering over this interminable plain in a dark night or foggy day. My thoughts were prophetic as a thick mist, a very unusual occurrence, crept instantly over the scene, shrouding the undulating landscape in an impenetrable and hoary mantle.
It's fascinating to hear the impressions of an early settler on Doty Island. Already, the captain was developing an idea of coming back, settling, and developing the land. Listen and think back to 1851, when Governor Doty had the Grand Loggery on his island and was attempting to bring in entrepreneurs to help build the cities.
I was struck with astonishment that such a Garden of Eden should be so little known, even in the eastern states, that such extraordinary advantages should be neglected. After a careful examination of many places in the western portion of the United States, I advisedly assert that the Lake Winnebago district is the most desirable and the finest in the world for immigrants. My reasons are as follows. First, the district in question has communication with the Atlantic on each border of the state. The Mississippi on the west, Lake Michigan on the east. There is likewise a water passage running diagonally across the state from Green Bay to the Mississippi. The soil is equal to any in America, and the climate remarkably healthy. The extent of water power is very great. The numerous rivers give admirable and cheap facilities for transport of goods in all directions. It is very rare for animal and vegetable life to flourish luxuriantly together. In the Winnebago district of Wisconsin, this combination of advantages is quite remarkable.
The initial reason Captain McKinnon wanted to come here was Doty's claim of the excellent hunting. The captain was an avid and excellent hunter of all game. Let's listen to his hunting experience.
Leaving Oshkosh, the steamer still coasted the western shores, which became fringed with dense woods, and arrived at the end of the lake, where it discharges its waters by two channels into the Fox River. The island which the two outlets form is the beau ideal of an Indian's habitation. Divided from the mainland on each side by a channel about 150 yards broad, they unite at the northern end, forming a miniature lake, the Little Butimore. As the water has a descent of 10 feet along the shore of the island, it is admirably adapted for fishing. Indeed, the Indians often travel hundreds of miles to enjoy this sport in their old and favorite home. I never beheld such swarms of fish in my experience, and from numerous rises after flies, I should think it must be a first-rate place for fly fishing. The eastern shore of this lake is perhaps the finest ground for deer shooting in the States. It is covered with a heavy growth of the finest and largest trees we have seen in North America. These woods are intersected at all points with deer paths, most of which terminate on the shores of the lake. By placing a boat or boats at certain points and putting 2 or 3 staunch but slow hounds in the woods, any number of deer may be driven into the lake. This method of shooting is, of course, used only in the summer. The small creeks and sloughs are absolutely swarming with wildfowl in the autumn, when they congregate in vast quantities, preparing to migrate south in the beginning of winter. Here they get fat upon the wild rice and are delicious eating. Woodcocks breed in this part of Wisconsin, and are to be found in vast numbers. In a small garden attached to the governor's house of not more than 1 acre, it was usual to kill 3 couple of woodcocks every morning before breakfast. But the chief glory in a sporting sense I conceive to be the grouse shooting. The vast prairies on the west side of the lake must be swarming with these great fat fellows.
After 6 weeks of exploring, Captain McKinnon was hooked on Menasha and the island. With the year leave coming to an end, the captain must go back to England and command his ship.
McKinnon will serve 3 more years in the Royal Navy, retiring in 1854 with 35 years of service and rank of captain. He knew what he wanted to do, retire and return to Menasha. He took Governor Doty up on his land grant offer and bought a large parcel of land on Doty Island. Present-day Park Street, Menasha, to Park Drive in Neenah, then east to Lake Winnebago. He purchased more land over the years. Let us explore some of his efforts at investing and building our community, including gifts to the community during his 11-year stay. The captain's first focus was to build the family home. They picked the perfect location on the bank of the Fox River, noted with the X. The location would become 836 Kai Street. The magnificent home was torn down in 1937, replaced with the George Jr. and Margaret Bonter residence, still in residence today. Once settled, he began making things more efficient to live in this growing community. In 1968, the Appleton Post-Crescent wrote about a trip the captain made with a fellow Englishman between Fond du Lac and Menasha. This article will explain what he does and what has to be done next. Here is a summary of their experience and closing words from the editor.
Sharing a wagon trip with another Englishman, the two had a fine time together enjoying the Wisconsin scene until they ran out of Plank Road. Their troubles began with stumps, holes, and stretches of muck. First, a valuable box of window glass was jolted off the wagon as one wheel of the wagon sank down to its hub. All of the passengers lent a hand to right the wagon on solid ground and went on their way, only to hit another unsuspecting rough spot. The wagon tipped over, and the men fell into the mud. Once the wagon was reloaded, it was too heavy to make it out of the mud. They left the wagon in the muck and sought shelter for the night with a local farmer. In the morning, they found the road ahead was as hazardous as what was behind them. They hired a team of oxen to pull them out of the mud hole. 3 miles down the road, they found themselves in another mud hole. This time, a double team of oxen was needed. 4 miles from Fond du Lac, they came upon a plank road, which they joyfully welcomed, as it took them 2 days, 6 upsets to their wagon and themselves, plus the help of several teams of oxen to cover the 24 miles of unplanked road. It is no wonder the captain wrote, "The new country that is without planked roads has little or no value, as a farmer cannot carry produce to market or even get supplies."
Starting on his property, the captain cut a road through the dense forest from Lake Winnebago to Little Lake Butamore, separating the villages of Neenah and Menasha. this road became known as McKinnon Avenue. Later, shortened to the Avenue, then Nicollet Avenue. In 1917, the road, with some revisions, was officially dedicated as Nicollet Boulevard. He also furnished the means to build a plank road to Appleton. Over the next few years, he helped to improve roads and built a crimp bridge at the north channel of the Fox River. He then proceeded to build a farm and horse breeding business. Upper left is a drawing of that facility. The captain had a farm where he bred beef cattle, horses, sheep, and chickens. In 1854, on the American liner, the Ocean Queen, he shipped some of the finest pedigreed stock, including 5 South Dawn sheep and 4 Cochin China chicken and a few Spanish fowls. His farm introduced the first listed stock and blooded horses in the country. They were the best and most celebrated racing stock in England. By early 1860s, the famous stock was fetching fabulous sums and eagerly sought for in England. His personal horse, King Kimry, was considered the finest specimen of horse to trot to the American soil. As John Strange remembered, quote, "He had a stable of beautiful and 18-month-old horses as could be found anywhere. He was a great lover and a good judge of fine horses," end quote. Also included in the 1854 shipment was an 18-month-old highly bred beef cattle, a Durham bull. Menasha residents referred to this prized breeding bull as Menasha Mac. Today, the bull is remembered by our Menasha Macs baseball team, the Menasha Macs. Very nice. Captain McKinnon took advantage of the new land available in Menasha. He invested heavily in Menasha properties. One objective for investing in land was for his sons to have a secure future. On the corner of First Street and Milwaukee in Menasha is the present-day residents' reminder of the success of McKinnon as a land developer and an investor. The 360 First Street is the D.T.H. McKinnon House, which is currently on the National and State Register of Historical Places. The captain brought this land for his son Dustin. It remains much as it was built in 1881. On the 1/3 acre lot, Dustin built a 6,144-foot Queen Anne style with 8 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. They used to be known and was by the well-known architect from Oshkosh, William Walters. Granddaughter Ethel recalls her childhood home with a first-floor music room, formal dining room, front and back parlors. The staff consisted of a laundress, cook, maid, and chauffeur. Captain McKinnon not only used his land for financial means, but also used it for the benefit of the community. 2 current local churches have their history deeply rooted in the McKinnon story. St. Thomas Episcopal Church in Menasha has its congregational roots and services held in Menasha since 1853. That service at St. Stephen's was held in a building erected through the financial generosity of Captain McKinnon. On Christmas Day in 1914, St. Thomas was formed with the union of St. Stephen's and the Trinity Church in Neenah. The land that St. Patrick's Catholic Church is in Menasha currently sits on was originally owned by Captain McKinnon. In 1853, the Irish Catholics were looking to build a church. Captain McKinnon offered the use of his land on Doty Island. They built St. Charles, and 7 years later, he sold the land to them for $1. On March 2nd, 1882, St. Charles was destroyed by a fire caused by a defective chimney. Many of the parishioners mortgaged their farms and homes to raise money for the project. This new church was dedicated to and named St. Patrick's on July 5th, 1883. St. Patrick's still serves parishioners today. The captain used his lands to build businesses in Menasha. The village built a dam on the Fox River, which enabled businesses to grow. In 1850, with 1,200 inhabitants, Menasha had 6 sawmills, a grist mill, and an iron foundry. All of these facilities needed to support industries to keep the businesses operating. Captain McKinnon was one of the early developers of several facilities to support these manufacturers. On the east end of the Menasha Canal, property owned by the captain, the first Excelsior factory was built and operated by Knowles and Davis. Later, son Dustin would become the sole owner. For reference, Excelsior was and is wood wool, was an important wood product in the late 1800s. Before plastic packaging materials, there was a need for soft materials to cushion objects being shipped. Also on the canal, west of Taco Street, in a similar fashion, on the McKinnon property was built a pulley works. Again, Dustin will buy and organize McKinnon Pulley Works. Dustin will take over his father's affairs, and when the captain returned to England for good. Expanding the family portfolio, Dustin will be part of one owner of the first paper mills in Menasha, Island Paper. Captain McKinnon spent only 11 years in Menasha, but had a major impact on its growth. The first time he set foot on the island in 1851, he fell in love with the land and the people. His granddaughter's statement that he was, quote, an English gentleman farmer and traveled a great deal, end quote, was an understatement. He was much, much more to the city of Menasha.
Thank you, Jim. What an influence Captain McKinnon had on the early growth of Menasha. Now let's take a look at our second forgotten entrepreneur, Neenah's Henry Sherry. We'll cover his story in 3 sections. I'll present an overview of his biography. Becky will discuss building of his empire, and Jim will illustrate how Neenah benefited from its very own hometown lumberman. Born in New York, August 3rd, 1837, Henry Sherry was the 5th child of Hugh and Amita Sherry. In 1849, the Sherrys moved their family to the from the East Coast to Neenah. Henry quickly found a job as a dry goods merchant. When his parents moved to Minnesota, Henry remained in Neenah and took over his father's flour businesses. On May 2nd, 1865, he married Abby Paddock of Ripon. 6 years later, the couple had their only child, son Edward. Henry quickly expanded the family business, branching out into lumber and sawmills. By continuing to diversify and expand his businesses, he amassed a net worth of $1 million, becoming Wisconsin's most prominent lumberman. In 1877, Henry was elected alderman in Neenah's second ward and was involved in several community projects. In 1881, the Sherrys built their homestead, Laura Wright, on Wisconsin Avenue, becoming an influential citizen within our community. Henry was thrilled in 1892 when his son entered the family business after Edward graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. By 1895, the Sherry fortune was nearing $1.5 million, or $52 million in today's dollar. However, with heavy losses in the Depression, the Sherry family and businesses were forced into bankruptcy. The following decade saw lawsuits and rebuilding of the family fortune. He remained president of Winnebago Realty until his death on November 7, 1919. Abby remained in the home until her passing 1823. Both were buried at Oak Hill Cemetery in Neenah. Now Becky will detail the building of the Sherry Empire.
All right, I get to detail the Sherry family business operations. It all begins with Henry Sherry's father, Hugh. As Tom mentioned, in 1849, Hugh moves his family to Neenah from Philadelphia. Being a miller by trade, Hugh quickly engaged in the building of several flour mills in Neenah. He started with financial involvement in the rebuilding of the abandoned old government mill, Grist Mill. The mill was built by the government for the failed Winnebago Rapids project. In 1852, he built the Clement Sherry Mill and the Winnebago flouring mills, pictured at left. Later, Hugh Sherry built the Fox River Flour Mill. This mill burned down and was rebuilt as the Globe Paper Mill. Hugh also went on to form the Falcon Flouring Mill. Neenah and Menasha became the second largest producer of flour in the state. They were second only to Milwaukee because of the efforts of millers like Sherry. In 1864, Hugh built the family home, pictured right, a large stucco brick Greek revival house that is still a residential home today. Once Henry was involved, he quickly began to expand the family business by diversifying into several fields. Initially, he started sawmills that extended throughout the logging districts in the state. These operations included not only sawmills, but later planing mills, shingle mills, barrel stave mills, and company stores for support. In order to vertically integrate his operations, he began buying land, lots and lots of land. For instance, in 1885, he partnered with Neenah's S.A. Cook to purchase a tract of 1,160 acres of pine land. Sherry focused on forest land to harvest for his sawmills and established the Sherry Lumber Company in Neenah. Sherry Lumber secured government contracts to furnish materials for government shipping vessels in the area. Over time, Sherry Lumber land cut 25 million feet of logs annually, making it one of the largest lumber operations in the state. Sherry also branched out into separate industries, like real estate, to help facilitate the process of buying and selling the land. Always looking to improve operations, Sherry bought water and dam rights. He turned this investment into a profit center, harnessing the power in the dams. With this power, he developed the water, light, and power companies. To improve shipping and delivery times on land, he bought railroad cars and access to railroad lines. The significance of profitable operations like Henry Sherry's to the community, especially Neenah, can never be understated. Here is what the Neenah Times noted in 1879 after he sold an operation in the city.
Mr. Oscar Wolf, Henry Walker, and Ole Winters have purchased the sawmill property of Henry Sherry in this city and intended erecting early next spring a large flouring mill. We trust that this change will not take Mr. Sherry away from Neenah. His energy and prudent foresight have built up a large business interest in this city, winning success when men of less push and smaller capacity must have failed. The new firm we wish abundant prosperity.
In true Sherry style, he was about diversifying his business portfolio and giving back to his community. He supported community organizations and was elected to the first board of directors of the Manufacturers National Bank of Neenah, formed in 1881. In 1886, in an attempt to broaden Neenah's industrial base, he organized the Neenah Boot and Shoe Manufacturing Company. Sherry bought stock and supported the company immediately after its creation. Henry was on the board of directors and was president of this organization. In the 1890s, he bought the Island Brewery in Menasha for $11,000. Located on Nicolay Boulevard, it will later become the Walter Brothers Brewery. In 1899, the Winnebago Realty Company and the Wisconsin Realty Company were formed. Controlling shares in the Winnebago Realty Company were held by the Sherry family. In addition, Sherry was responsible for a respectable chunk of Neenah's residential and commercial development. We will cover the details of this later. Remember Captain McKinnon's 1856 prediction about the English capital flowing west to the United States? By 1870, the flow of capital investment spurned a 30-year run of growth throughout the United States, reaching deep into Wisconsin. The railroad, steel, and oil industries expanded exponentially as vast wealth was created. In Neenah, Henry Sherry took advantage of the business and investment opportunities. He became one of the richest lumber barons in Wisconsin. The Gilded Age was a 30-year period of business booms and busts. Within that period, the United States suffered two major panics, the Panic of 1873 and the Panic of 1893. When the stock market crashed, investors began to sell off the investments in their American projects. Menasha's The Gazette book stated how the area was affected during the first panic in 1873.
The year finds the entire country, and with it our city, suffering from an unparalleled business depression. The cry of hard times was never more general or truthful than for the past year, business failures being a daily occurrence on every hand, our own city being no exception. Real estate and personal property have shrunk in general values nearly 1/2 within 3 years, and a general feeling of apprehension and gloom pervades the country. The present season has also been such as to unsettle all business calculations. From the 1st of October until the 1st of January, it rained almost incessantly, and for weeks, business was at a standstill. Lake Winnebago at this time, January 15th, not being entirely frozen over. Steamboat excursions were indulged in on Christmas and New Year's Day. However, the lumbering business is a complete failure for the winter, resulting in serious losses to all engaged in this vocation.
Menasha's Elisha D. Smith's Pail Factory did not survive in this business downturn. Menasha's largest employer was $250,000 in debt and went into receivership. Henry Sherry's operation, however, weathered the storm and continued to expand businesses. Later that year, Smith reorganized as the Menasha Wooden Ware Company, and today it remains in operation as Menasha Corporation. 15 years later, the Panic of 1893 shook the United States. This would cause problems for Sherry's enterprises. Sherry held things together until 1897. When the business and family lost significant amounts of money, Sherry had no other choice but to file for bankruptcy. With debts exceeding assets by $1.2 million, the collapse was the greatest financial disaster the two cities will ever know. Although Sherry's businesses had been greatly damaged, the organization began rebuilding at the first opportunity. After the bankruptcy, however, Henry's role in the family businesses became progressively limited. He did retain an active interest in the Winnebago Realty Company, however. Son Edward began taking over most of the family's affairs. Henry remained a close advisor to his son until his death in 1919. Going bankrupt is always a messy endeavor, as it disrupts your life in a major way. Henry lost property, such as the post office block and his office building in the downtown, but he was able to keep their home on Wisconsin Avenue. As the debts piled up, the lawsuits followed. The Sherry family and organizations were in the courts for years. One example, the Sherry Lumber Company's debt had grown to $88,500, with interest that piled up to over $90,000, and Sutton Manufacturing's debt grew to $25,500. Some of the debt was discharged. However, appeal suits dragged on, costing more of their time and money. As earlier stated, the Sherrys rebuilt their businesses even as they fought the lawsuits and bankruptcy filings. These are some of the organizations that were part of the Sherry businesses to start the new decade. Ed's management style was different from that of his father's. Moving to Milwaukee, he would manage as an executive and owner with less of a focus on expansion.
When a successful business is established in the city prospers. Neenah was no different. Not only the immediate results of unemployment, tax base, and growth, but 150 years later, we were able to take advantage of the areas that Henry developed. Henry was responsible for a respectable portion of Neenah's residential and commercial development. Developed by his father, Hugh, the near west side neighborhood of Neenah became known as Sherrytown. This was under Sherry and expanded and flourished. Today, it is a historic Sherrytown district. It is the city's oldest neighborhood and is where the city early flour mills first started. The intersection of Henry and Sherry Streets are the heart of this area, as is Father, his Hughes residence at 313 Church Street. Noted on the right, it is still a residence today. Riverside Park is a lasting reminder of Henry Sherry. In early 1872, Henry offered to sell a portion of his land on the river next to Wisconsin Avenue for $220 per acre. Over the summer, the residents debated this generous offer. Opposition was intense, calling for it's an extravagant use of public funds, since the village of Neenah already had 2 designated parks for space already. But on December 24th, the voters finally approved the offer. Acquired the property, 20 acres for $440,000. The city declared the park is a Christmas gift for others. It's $4,400. Circle that. Much bigger number, right? With the strong opposition, the order of the costs that were there, the city founders negotiated the point. which included the council tree in that offer. 3 years later, to Henry's dismay and valued at $1,600, part of the point was condemned by the City Corps of Engineers. They intended to deepen the canal to accommodate the larger steamboats that were improving access to the park. The parcel became the city's and the council tree was removed. John Strange saw the remainders of the council tree for Mr. Sherry. The same year the council tree was cut down, Mr. Sherry donated to the park his wooden dance hall, which became a central feature of the community. It was the first structure built on the north end of the park, including outdoor bathrooms. This is the original proposal to the city in Henry Sherry's own handwriting.
To the Honorable Mayor and Common Council of the City of Neenah, I hereby propose to donate to the city all of my interest as a stockholder in and all my claim for material furnished amounting to $233.94 in September 1878 against the building structure on Riverside Park known as Park Hall, providing the city will, at its expense, paint and repair said building, and will put a stone foundation under it and build a veranda around it. Henry Sherry.
The final Sherry gift to the city park would become from his son Ed. After his mother passed away, Ed deeded to the city of Neenah without cost for public use 21 lots and 920 foot of lakefront property. An extremely remarkable contribution that to the lasting tribute of Henry Sherry. Another significant impact to our downtown is the architecture. Let's take a look at the influence that we can admire today. Henry commissioned William Walters, a renowned American architect from Oshkosh, to develop several properties for him on Wisconsin Avenue in Neenah. Walters was very busy in the early 1880s, drawing plans for the Sherry's home, business office, and the city's post office block. In 1883, Mr. Walters drew up plans for a business block. The business block became known as the post office block, as the post office occupied the first floor corner. There were 3 other retail spaces on the first floor, and according to the fire insurance maps of the day, one side of the second floor was the Masonic Hall, and the other the City Council meeting room. Lost in the bankruptcy settlement was the post office block. Still standing, it now houses the current businesses, Zacatecas and the Hong Kong Buffet. Next time you're downtown Neenah, take a look at this building. You can see the HS logo for Henry Sherry up on top. Walters designed Sherry's office building the same time he designed the post office block. They were kitty corner from each other and the hub for all of Mr. Sherry's business dealings. The 2-story brick structure was a classic Walters design for the time. It was built of cream-colored brick with coarse and dark brick and chambered corner with a front door flanked by columns holding up the pediment. Above the front door and the pediment was a large window, and above that was a set of small triplet windows just below the ultimate pediment. The building was demolished in the early 1970s. Henry Sherry's building spree started with the family home in 1883. Residence, still there today, is a large and ornate mansion on East Wisconsin Avenue. The house was placed on both the state and National Register of Historical Places in 1999. It is a masonry two-story late Victorian Gothic house on a limestone ashlar foundation. 4 bedrooms with sink and fireplace and a 5-story square tower. The Sherrys remained in this home and was sold after Abby passed away in 1923. The best explanation about the Henry Sherry's impact on Neenah was described by Neenah historian Peter Adams.
No history of downtown Neenah would be complete without mention of Henry Sherry. Sherry was one of the most powerful lumbermen in Wisconsin, and he built much of downtown Neenah. Sherry eventually became very disliked because his business failed and many people lost their jobs. But he probably did more than any other person to build Neenah.
What an extraordinary life and big impact on the city of Neenah. We enjoyed presenting these stories of these 2 forgotten entrepreneurs and hope that you enjoyed learning about their contributions to our city. These 2 families knew each other well and interacted in several ways. The captain's early prediction of the potential growth for the Fox River Valley helped fuel business expansion that Henry Sherry took advantage of. Both families utilized the same first-class architect for their homes and businesses. Also, Henry Sherry and Lauchlin McKinnon, deeply involved in the paper industry, were business associates. Our mission tonight was to inform you a little bit about our city's early histories. We hope that we've accomplished this goal, and we do thank you for coming this evening.
I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. I also wanted to thank our ghost speakers, Erica and Tom, for their wonderful addition to our program. And then as you leave tonight, be sure to take a couple of snacks, and we'll see you in May.